Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Background: had a history of seeing, hearing odd things and experiences throughout my life as a child, but always dismissed them as imagination, seeing as this is what I was told. Be about 12-ish, just moved from my old house to a new home. New home's entirety had odd eerie vibes, but nothing too questionable. My room was at the end of a long hallway, and I'd often lay at the foot of the bed using the open door light to read Goosebumps. A good 2 feet away from the foot of my bed against the wall is my dresser, and on it an old built-in VHS playing box TV. I remember the first time I encountered a strange occurrence. I was laying at the foot of my bed reading when I noticed the light got dim. I looked down the hallway and saw what appeared to be a walking shadow slowly shuffling from the living room into the kitchen. After sitting on the foot of my bed in shock for a moment, I went to investigate, thinking it may have been my father perhaps. I walk into the kitchen and no one is there, but a few odd cabinets were open, and the garage door was locked, so it couldn't have gone anywhere. Go back into the living room and mother is sound asleep on the couch. Siblings are all asleep as well. Get scared and sleep on the other end of the couch. Now every detail I give about setting and surrounding have significance, maybe not in their respective post, but they will all tie in together. Few days after the first occurrence, I'm laying in bed on my Game Boy playing Pokemon when I feel like someone is standing next to me. I quickly glanced at the doorway to see if maybe one of my parents was trying to catch me awake. Nothing. However, I still feel as if I'm being watched and not alone. I suddenly notice a faint breathing sound and lay still in shock. I turn my head from where I was laying at the foot of the bed, using the doorway light for Pokemon, to the head of my bed. There in the corner of my room stood a shadowy figure about the height of the room itself. As I stared at it in shock, its entire figure seemed to breathe. Then right as I went to get out of bed to run to my mother's room, it vanished into the wall. I quickly covered my head with the blanket and laid back against the wall until I fell asleep. Now I began to have an increasing amount of anxiety and unease in this house as my time spent there progressed, but there was one place in the house in particular none of us seemed to like, and that was the small spare bathroom in my mother's room. Not only was this bathroom cramped and just uncomfortable to use, but the room seemed to emanate evil, and merely stepping into it felt like stepping into a place you don't belong and need to get out of, so we only ever used it as storage. On several other occasions I have seen the shadowman in my room. He always only stood in that corner of my room and never appeared to move or do anything. One night, however, I was laying in bed at the head of my bed listening to music in my CD player when a light flicked on in the room. I glanced up at my VHS TV on the dresser and it had turned itself on. I stared at it for a second and looked around but did not see anyone near it, nor the shadowman. As I went to get up to turn it off, the VHS tape, the brave little toaster plopped out of the TV and busted on the floor. The TV shut itself back off. I quickly hopped in bed after seeing this and laid back down with the blankets over my head until I fell asleep. Now at this point I was beginning to get very scared and had told my parents, but they dismissed what I was saying as bad dreams or overactive imagination, so I refrained from going to them again because I feared that I had thought I was making it up or just being silly. I was curious about what was going on and how to stop it, so I had gotten multiple books from the school library on demons, ghosts, and paranormal creatures. After procuring a book on the paranormal, I decided I'd try and cleanse the house. After realizing that I didn't have the materials required, I still kept the books, but merely as an informative index, and turned to religion. My mother had always pushed religion on me as a child, and I believed it, still do, because why not? I prayed to God and begged for forgiveness of my sins and asked that He'd stop these things from occurring. I then went to my mother to do the same, because I knew if it involved religion she'd take it seriously, so she prayed as well. After having prayed, everything seemed smooth and less eerie, no shadowman, no odd happenings, just peace. When things settled down, I had quit reading the books and left them under my bed in my book bin. After a period of tranquility, the librarian at school had inquired as to where my books have gone and if I still had them. I informed her I'd return them the next day. Later that evening I was getting them out to put them in my bag and decided to give them another read over before turning them in. I sat at the foot of my bed reading the one about demons because it seemed the most intriguing, seeing as it tied directly into my religion. I then put the books back into my bag and went to bed. That night marked the beginning of a series of dreams I'd wished I'd never experienced. When I'd mentioned that we had just moved into this house, I failed to mention I had moved a lot as a kid, up to this point 13 times to be exact, and our previous house had an eerie laundry room basement that I'd oftentimes think I heard noises coming from. The first evening after returning the books, the atmosphere felt different, not necessarily anything too bad, but I was noticeably finding myself anxiously glancing around more. That night as I went to bed, I remember having little to no difficulty sleeping, which isn't commonplace for me, but nonetheless I clocked easily that night. My dreams were a fairly odd, but usual mesh of lighthearted childish dreams that are all a blur, but the final memorable one was hide and seek. Now dreaming. For some reason, a bunch of my family friends and relatives all came over to our house to play hide and seek. I took great pride in my hide and seek abilities and had no intention of being caught. I remember hiding with my cousin behind the end of the kitchen countertop next to the garage door, with the trash can in front of us. I had asked my cousin to move, but he wouldn't, and so out of fear of getting caught I decided to hide behind some of the boxes in the garage. When I went to open the garage door, I found myself staring down the steps to our old basement, yet when I turned around I was still in the kitchen. Something felt foggy, but I dismissed it as deja vu or something and bit my tongue and hid and proceeded down the steps. I turned the light on and made my way into the corner and hid behind the side of the washer and dryer so that I could see the stairway in my line of sight through the gap between them and the wall. As I was hiding, I noticed the ambience begin to change. The giggly nature and callouts of laughter seemed to subside. Suddenly, one of my parents' friends' kids ran down the steps and told me to get out of the house now. They were screaming for me to leave as they hurriedly ran back up the steps. 12-year-old me was all too familiar with this bait tactic and had no intention of being found. I decided to stay until they officially declared me victor. As I sat there behind the washer staring at the steps, everything went quiet. I could no longer hear anyone upstairs. Then I heard the doorknob of the garage basement door click as the door opened. I saw a large gangly shadow cast down the steps onto the floor and watched inquisitively as it drew closer. I quickly hid my head back behind the washer so as to not be seen through the crack. I sat there holding my breath as I listened to the steps draw nearer. Finally, the step stopped and I heard the thing say, "I found you," in a voice that sounded distant, as if it were calling out from within some sort of container or it were in my head. As I peered over the washer, I saw it standing there dripping blood. She was oddly hunched with talons instead of fingers, and a sharp piranha-like mouth and black beady slit eyes. Her skin looked as if she was decrepit and suffering from necrosis, and was a sickly pale gray. She met my gaze with a smile. And dream. I woke up in the morning gasping for breath, covered in sweat and feeling nauseous. I apologize for grammatical errors. I'm half asleep but really want to type this out because I've been wanting to share it for so long. I had began having several dreams throughout the week, at least 3 out of 7 where she'd appear. As the days went by and the nights set in, I began seeing her in increasing frequency and objectively closer to me in my dreams. Initially, the only dream she'd been in that involved my home was the hide-and-seek dream. I had had many other dreams where she'd show, even if we had no real interactions. I'd see her, be it on TV, in pictures, peripheral, etc. Dream. This all changed one evening when I had a dream that I had to go outside to take our dog to use the restroom. As she was peeing outside, I was minding my own business, glancing at the sky, neighboring houses, etc., when all of a sudden I caught sight of her underneath a street lamp about 2 houses down. I stood there frozen, staring at her for what seemed like ages. As if it were the gunshot to a race, as soon as my dog noticed, he barked, and the second he barked, she bolted towards me. I stood frozen for a moment in fear, watching helplessly as she came leaping, striding towards me. I ran for the house as fast as I could and made it just in time to slam the door. I quickly locked the deadbolt as I felt the doorknob begin to shimmy violently. Then it stopped suddenly. I waited staring at it for it to continue, but it never did. I shyly peeked through the blinds only to find that she had vanished without a trace. I went to my room, shut my door, turned on the light, and went to bed. And dream. After having the dream about her at the house, I began to get increasingly paranoid. After having the second dream where she appeared near my house, she began appearing in all of them, and they all took place near my home. The third dream I had with her near my home involved me witnessing things almost from her perspective in third person. It's as if when I went to sleep, I began watching some sort of CCTV camera view of her doing things. It no longer felt as if I was physically present while spectating. In this dream, I watched her standing in my backyard staring at my back door, sort of half laughing in a scratchy, reverberated voice as she began picking the garage door lock. She then managed to get inside and pick the second lock leading to the kitchen with her towel on as well. As she was picking the kitchen door lock, I heard her whisper that she's coming for me. As she stepped foot in the kitchen after having picked the lock, I woke up. I woke up feeling as if I hadn't gotten hardly any rest at all, as if I was suffering the effects of some sort of vampirism. Noticing I was near late for school, my mother quickly got me ready and shuffled me out to school. That evening when I came home, I found my dad. He's in and out of the house a lot. Parents had marriage issues fixing the garage door with tools. He explained that it appeared someone had broken in, but he didn't find anything missing, thankfully, but he doesn't want to take chances. We couldn't manage to get the kitchen to garage door lock fixed, so we just propped a chair in front of it. The garage door now had the deadbolt and bottom door knob lock for added security. I think it's important to quickly note the layout of the home, seeing as it plays a role in story, so I made this MS Paint image to help. The eerie bathroom in my mother's room had a vent in the ceiling. The only time I now wouldn't dream about her is if I wasn't at my house, or if my dreams were completely black and I couldn't recall them. In finding this out, I'd often stay at one of my two grandmothers' homes to try and escape the living hell. After having a very brief 2-night down period, I dreamt of her again. Dream. Fourth dream with her. I was now back in spectator view, but the lighting was almost non-existent and the POV was very fixated and cramped. I heard the sound of wind, air, and an odd metal scratching noise. Suddenly I heard something that sounded like metal scratching and scraping, and my POV changed to outside my mother's open bathroom doorway. I watched in horror as the ceiling vent cover had been undone and lay hanging halfway open as she effortlessly contorted herself, almost seemingly impossibly given her size, down out of the duct and onto the floor. Oddly enough, she made almost no noise upon landing. She stood there and began to grin, staring forward in place as she said once again, "I'm coming for you." End dream. I woke up yet again feeling drained and feeble as I dragged myself to school, thinking nothing of it, once again. That evening when I came home, I didn't even think to check my mother's bathroom because 1, very seldom ever goes in there, and 2, I was swamped with schoolwork. Later that evening I was watching SpongeBob in the living room when my mother came home with groceries and gave me a load of toiletries to take to her bathroom since our main was stocked. Upon entering her bathroom I immediately felt ill and quickly recalled last night's dream. Upon glancing up I was greeted by the all too familiar busted vent cover. I quickly stocked the cabinets, then went and told Dad. He fixed it but didn't believe me. By this point I was beginning to grow tired of nobody believing me, but there was nothing I could do to fix the dreams either. I had contemplated asking my mother to move but knew she wouldn't take me seriously. I went and stayed with Grandma over the weekend after a dream so as to catch a break. While I was at Grandmother's, I heard Mom on the phone with her talking about potentially having found a place with cheaper rent and better living arrangements. Upon hearing the news I decided to tough it out and stay, seeing as it was most likely merely coincidental that these things were happening, and my parents were probably right. I was just being too childish and over-imaginative. Oh, how I wish that was the case. It was a day after I had gotten back from Grandmother's, Tuesday, and it was a long day at school. I remember coming home that evening, getting a snack, watching some tele, eating dinner, and crashing super early at around 6 p.m. I was too tired for Game Boy, if that says anything. Dream. Fifth dream. This dream started off once again outside in my backyard. She was standing staring at my garage door before walking up to it and examining it. She then proceeded to walk over to our outside storage closet door. She went to pick and lock the knob, but then stopped and tried it first, and she chuckled as she found it unlocked. I watched her from the outside of the doorway hunch down and begin clawing away at the right side wall of the storage closet. She began toothily whistling. Airy and imperfect, presumably because her odd jagged teeth as she clawed away at the wall. She then abruptly stopped, grinned, and said once more, "I'm coming for you," before pushing through the wall and coming out through the bottom of my mother's bathroom's cabinets. End dream. I woke up and was going to go investigate, but Mom's room was shut because she was getting ready for work. When I came home from school that evening, my father was speaking with pest control guys in my mother's bathroom about how they think a possum or raccoon must have clawed through the wall into the bathroom cabinets. He later got the materials and patched the hole, and told us to make sure to keep the bathroom door, outer locked for some odd reason, and outside storage closet locked until it's fixed proper. After having the last dream, I went and stayed at my grandmother's for like a week because it had worked out fine because it was over Easter break. I just got back from my grandmother's and was looking for some of my action figures in my toy chest because I was bored and wanted to play with a friend who had come over after school. Since I couldn't find them, I went to check the garage because Dad would often throw away toys I didn't put up properly in the garage and give them back later when I learned to respect them. Upon doing so, I found a big blow-up raft we used in my grandmother's pool. I hatched an idea and decided that if I used the rafter like a cover for my bed, I wouldn't have to worry. I put the raft over my bed that night. It sat on the raised edge of the head post and foot post to give a small gap for air room. And I remember staying up late that night playing new Game Boy Advance SP I got over Easter. Ended up passing out playing, I assume, because I don't recall falling asleep. Dream. In this dream, it was different. It felt like I had not initially dreamed of her, but the dream I was having had been slowly overrun and contorted into the dream with her. Instead of starting from the beginning, it appeared when I was brought to her it was a mid-dream. She was already inside, and I have no clue, but she was standing in my mother's bathroom doorway smiling as she peered around the corner and tapped her talons along the doorframe. She shuffled from my mom's room into my doorway. My paw was hovering over my bed, but the raft was no longer there. She stood in my doorway for a moment before walking over to my body and pulling the covers down with one of her talons. I then watched as she proceeded to scratch my chest with her talons. I saw myself wincing and my face grimace and watched a sadistic smile spread across her face as she then turned to stare directly into my floating paw as if she were looking my third-person presence in the eyes. Staring directly into my floating paw, she whispered with a raspy, echoed voice, "Found you." And dream. I woke up with my chest burning and medbed soaked from be it piss, sweat, or a mixture of both. Sure enough, I looked down at my chest and there were scratch marks. I immediately began trying to find a logical reasoning and told myself I had to have just done it in my sleep, and since the raft wasn't in the dream wasn't real. But then as soon as I said that, my heart stopped as I began to scan the room and realized my raft was gone. The house was quiet as well, no TV on, no music, no talking, nothing. Yet there was sun shining through the windows and my clock said 12 p.m. I got out of bed and put on a shirt before stumbling out of my doorway. As I was walking past my mother's open door in the hallway, I instantly felt my body go into full alert. The hair on my neck stood up and it felt as if the gravity around me weighed a ton. I slowly glanced over my shoulder to the left, and upon doing so was met by an all too familiar face. There, standing halfway exposed in my mother's bathroom doorway, tapping her talons on the wall with a smile, was her. All of a sudden, almost involuntarily, my muscles jerked and I ran screaming down the hallway and out the front door. Once I got outside, I saw my mother at a table at the front of the house. Apparently she had started a yard sale. I had told her what happened, everything about the dreams and what was going on, and she kept insisting it was just a bad dream, but I assured her it was real. We talked about it later, as I stayed outside all evening unless accompanied inside, and went to my grandma's that night. My mom had arranged for me to stay with my grandma until she finished finalizing the moving process, which luckily was about a week and a half later. It was sort of like this and this combined. That was the first time I've ever experienced any paranormal event without being able to dismiss it as some sort of obscure shadow or an overactive imagination. The fear that it instilled was all too real, and the involuntary response my body had to it, and the overwhelming sense of my life is in danger, this is life or death, this is real, you have to do something, was too real to not consider. I still have that image burned in my retina, and have a multitude of other paranormal experiences happen throughout my life, but none as seemingly malicious as that. Oddly enough, I'm nearly convinced it was as myself that's haunted and plagued by apparitions as opposed to my living quarters, haha. Nevertheless, thank you to those who stuck through my slow typing. I hope you enjoyed reading it and it was worth the wait. I am rather tired now and will probably be hitting the hay soon. To any who question the authenticity of this story, I'm willing to die by it. I know what I saw and experienced, and believe you me, I wish it weren't real, but it truly happened. And to those of you who have trouble believing because they haven't experienced anything of the sort, consider yourself lucky. I still believe it's largely contributed to how mentally disturbed I am today. I'll stick along enough to see some feedback. Going to go make a glass of warm milk.
Why do you think you guys moved 13 times? How old are you now?
I'm 19 now. Mother had it hard. Father was an abusive alcoholic druggie. A lot of times we would move because of disputes they had that would embarrassingly result in neighbors contacting landlord. Mother trying to find a place with better living conditions, new job ops, etc.
Thought it may have been related. I hope your family is doing better now. Have you learned to not see the thing?
Yeah, I haven't seen that thing since then, aha. However, I have had a plethora of other strange happenings. Here recently saw a girl in our current home I had mistaken as my youngest sister initially. She opened my door, stood in the doorway, was unresponsive, then shut it slowly and ran. I searched all through the house only to find all doors locked, no strange girl, and my siblings in bed sound asleep. A while later, without having mentioned it, asked my youngest sister why she is so afraid to be alone in rooms, and she said because she's afraid the girl is watching her, and described the exact same girl. Yet none of my other family members has seen her.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.